All right, we're back. This time with Ilya again. I think you should know I think you should someday make a video tour of some of your favorite drawings and paintings. Or have I missed it? Asked Ilya. And I constantly everything I do is about my favorite paintings and drawings. Pretty much. I try not to use anything that I don't favor, but on the other hand, there are a lot of drawings and paintings that I hold up to myself as models in multiple ways and that sort of thing. And I'll do my best. And you said, and show us what is about their qualities that you find fascinating. Why is that? So, because I've noticed that on numerous occasions you're mentioning the joy and the pleasure. I indeed started to ask myself those little questions like why I find it beautiful. Do I feel curious and happy while drawing? By this, why I find it beautiful, I'm always telling students, if you don't find it beautiful, go do something else. If the beauty's not there, if you don't respond to it. Do I feel curious and happy while drawing, or is it a chore, et cetera, et cetera? Happy while drawing, there's a different, happiness is a funny thing. If you feel, sort of giddy and high and stuff, I don't know if that's a thing, but there's a satisfaction that you'll feel if you're engaging the thing for its beauty rather than for its accuracy. And by the way, the beauty and the accuracy are not disconnected. So don't think I'm trying to be one of those guys. Anyway, and it's actually fascinating how you can sometimes become absorbed by the visual field, even if my drawings of the field are still not top level. I like to hear that kind of conversation. When you ponder on this kind of question in the process, yeah. If I've done nothing else in my videos, it pleases me that people are making that a conscious practice, of searching out the beauty. I'm very pleased about all that sort of stuff. But I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to give you a video that just shows some of my favorite pictures. And some of them are favorites of all time. Most of them I come back to. I think it was Oscar Wilde who said you can tell it's a good picture on the wall if you have to go back and look at it again. And that's really a thing if you keep it around, so to speak. And I think that's the thing you're going to find yourself doing. Now, I don't want to do a lot of preliminaries because there are a lot of pictures to look at. And I'm not trying to be definitive here. I'm not trying to be a lecturer that tells you why you ought to like this or why you ought to like that. I'm just giving you what you asked for, which is, some sense of what it is I like, and then what it is I like, what it is about it. What is it that I like about it? So I'll do my best on that. I admit that there's plenty of these pictures that I couldn't even begin to tell you all the things that give me that make up the satisfaction. That's part of the reason you continue on and on in our line with just a pursuit of more of the wonder of this special thing we call beauty. But let me get on with this. I was thinking there was something else, but I've done this video, by the way. This is my third take on this, so I'm going to be thinking all the way through here that I've said something that I haven't said, and so on. So, all right. Well, let's proceed with some images, and I'll pick up pieces that I've left off if I don't. Thank you, Linda Jen, for your recurring donation. Much appreciated. Hugely appreciated. Okay. I like this image as a point of departure because it's a sculpture in the first place, obviously, but it sort of embodies what I think of painting, what the value of the arts are to me, and there's two parts to it. One is just the pleasure of the thing in the sense of it's pleasing to the eye, in the case of sculpture, pleasing to the touch, or suggests pleasant touch, and then the second part is that it embodies some sense of life. I like that way Ayn Rand says that, art in the sense of life, but it embodies something about it. And this guy is, you might say, is, at least for me, in looking at this thing, I'm taking it from this, it's a captive slave, that this guy is this powerful guy, significant muscle and all the rest of that stuff, and he's trying to break out of the rock, just trying to get out of the stone, trying to get out there and empower himself to be able to be fully, human or whatever. And you get the sense of that struggle in Michelangelo, both in relation to his faith and his life. I read some of the poems. That would probably be the best place to get those references. But this one's always touched me because it's got that connection. It's got this sense of life, which is that it's a struggle and it's a search for enabling power, for the ability to. And in the meantime, so you have all this potential, but you're bound. And yeah, and then it's just I've always liked the touch of the look of marble in the process. Some smooth, some rough, some, et cetera. So something like that, okay? That's where I sort of live. Michelangelo's got this, and I'm going to sort of move right along here. I'm mostly just going to show you the pictures. Michelangelo's always pleased me with his color, surprisingly enough. So he's really in the world of let's make this a beautiful thing, decoratively, powerful in form, and then make it expressive of the subject, whatever it is you're talking about. In this case, it's a prophetess. I've always appreciated the Titian. This isn't a great image of that, but it's one of the better ones as far as I've been able to tell in color. So I suffer that upper glare on it. I apologize for that, but yeah, that's one. That's one that's full of poignancy. Now you could say maybe it's because of my background or whatever, but it's even if it's just the fallen leader, the fallen somebody, the fallen someone you loved, the tragic death, whatever. It's fraught with those kinds of emotions. The seriousness of this is really excellent. It's also it's big, simple, clear, not fuzzy. Its way of presenting. Forms are quite pleasing. So, and then the Veronese, the great colorist Veronese, apparently to many minds the greatest of all time. But this one, the Marriage at Cana, which also has Christ as a center, is oddly enough, doesn't power out into a center. He's just there. And I mean, there are stronger things like areas like this or stuff like this and here or whatever that are dominating in the terms of visual. So if you blur your eyes, it's curious that that's a dead spot in there. But little early for that. So still one of those pictures that you can't take your eyes off of. And Veronese you want to look at from a distance to really appreciate the color. And even Raphael, these two pictures, I really like the way he's brought figure organization when he's brought that to another level. I think, based on what we watch with his teacher Perugino. But both these pictures are very, very pleasing. He must be. I don't know what that is. Is that a Keys of the Kingdom or something? I don't know what it is. But anyway, but the lower one I particularly like. This is a fisherman scene. This is very, I would say, in the abstract patterning sort of way, very, very, very modern, very, very pleasing in that way. In the silhouette conversation. And of course, Velázquez, who's the first, I would say, in one sense, modern painter, he's using life much more than he's using imagination. In fact, I suspect that he's painting everything from life. He was a portrait painter, as they say. Now you might wonder why I'm not using the big Las Alondras and stuff. I really appreciate those pictures, as you know. But there's something about Velázquez in this phase that really appeals to me. The solidity of the form, the solidness of the drawing in general, and the nice organization. Of course, that whole series of dwarfs is really, really satisfying. But again, you're seeing a guy who knows how to handle form big. And you'll probably find that with everybody I bring up. There's the breadth of form is such a significant thing. And I was wondering if the Velázquez, this is the Velázquez really, I'm wondering if this is the one that Carlos Duran was after, this one, the Velázquez of the portraits. And what he was offering, for example, the portrait of him by Sargent, definitely looks more like this way of painting, not precisely, of course, than it does like there's no Boston School, Las Alondras kind of a treatment of fingers and things like that. It's pretty articulated. Rubens, I've always liked this one just because of the sheer abstraction there, the big pattern. That is it's a wave pattern, if you want to call it a swastika, but the Greeks already were using that sort of shape as a symbol of the wave. So there's a certain thing here that's very spectacular compositionally, and Rubens is a terrific composer. Good guy to look at for that. Holbein. Who doesn't like Holbein? The simplicity of his stuff. Maybe austerity sometimes. But no, it's more, it's not austere, not really. But this is a very serious portrait. These are serious people, that sort of thing. The patterning that goes on here, that ability to cut out a shape, and I don't want to say in a careless way, but just let it be shape. Let it play to the other reds or whatever it is. Let it be shape. But these guys, these ins and outs. I once saw, I should have bought it. I was in LA when I was a kid, basically. I was an 18-year-old probably. And I was in a store, maybe a penny store or something, and there was a costume there. It wasn't a costume at all. Something they were selling. It was a dress or something, and it had this set of patterns and pleats in it. I've always regretted that. I think I regretted it buying 10 minutes later, not buying it, as I was gone then from that place. What's not to love about Vermeer, of course, and nobody has to be told to, I don't think, to love Vermeer. And this one, of course, this one just blew my mind the first time I saw it. I was just like, what? And just the sheer beauty of the reds, the liquid lip, the use of light, and just as spectacular as can be. Just, if anybody's not aware of the influence of Vermeer on the Boston School and on anybody who paints light, become aware. Okay, and then there's this whole handling of the room, the light, for one thing, and there's just the architecture, just the architectonic sense of the thing, the order. It's really beautiful. And maybe it's the order, the stability. The lady looks like she's probably expecting a child. We don't know what she's reading, do we? But it's that storyline stuff. That's not the stuff that appeals to me about this. I've already talked to you about it. But I like that. I don't mind having it. In fact, you need to recognize that you have a story and make sure that it's, adequate to the job. Gamble used to say the subject is just a lubricant, and if it's the lubricant, it's the lubricant of what, Keep thinking that over, right? Rembrandt, who doesn't love him for his interpretation of the human face? Millet tries to express everything with the action of the body, but Millet, who does that too, as I'll show you in the drawings. But this one here is one of those, so this is the cerebral, and this is the heart. And this is the philosopher, of course. So it's the idea of a human with a mind and wandering up into the nether reaches of their mind, and then this part where you're kept alive by love, by the hearth and all the rest of that stuff. What a curious thing! What an interesting thing, huh? And and yet it's intriguing to just look at. It just has patterns and shape and that sort of thing. Very different from Vermeer, right? No. Get the difference between a guy who had an ordered life in a hotel and somebody else whose studio probably was a windy staircase and had no vertical lines anywhere, or a few. Yeah. Love these. What's not to love about Rembrandt in general? By the way, I'm using a couple pictures for some of these guys, both of which have influenced me, but I'm only doing it to give a bigger feeling of what I like about the guy. So. Watteau, I like his work. It's pleasing for that era, and I think I like him better than Boucher because he's got a sense of life that's plausible, but it's still kind of a party life and that sort of thing that he seems to be always talking about, the dance. Maybe that's an aesthetic idea that you're going to do artsy things, but in this one here, it's an unveiling of Cupid or rather of Psyche or something like that. Sorry to say I've forgotten what the subject of this thing is. And then there's this drawing showing such breadth that's just reminiscent of this particular drawing. And people really do rise above them. His drawing isn't all this amazing, but I wanted to put it out there just to show the breadth of his form and that sort of thing, and his management of form. I'll show more about him later. Poussin, he's the organization guy, right? He's the guy that really shows that organized pictures have better command. They command the stage, whatever you want to call it that. So he became a model for all everybody following him. All the French were paying attention to what Poussin had worked through. And this one was when I was a student with Gamble. This one was at the Fog. It's one of my favorite pictures just to go look at. Partially the beauty of the flesh here, which reminds you of the Start by Paxton, and the arm on the Blue Cup by Decamp, And you wonder to what extent these guys might not have been influenced. But then we actually saw when I was a student a copy of this exact painting, maybe done pretty close to life size by Paxton. And it was done with thick paint, Paxton's amount of paint. And that's why it was no attempt to be like him, to figure out paint. I think he was trying to study his form, design, and other things. But one of the things Ang was a Raphaelite. And here's his hero, Raphael, looking at the drawing for the painting of the Fornarino, which is obviously his muse, his inspiration. What's interesting about Ang, though, and these two pictures really embody it, and that is the ability to take a painting and make it look like it would have been painted in that era, not just be about that era, and look like a Delaroche would look like. No matter what era you're painting, it would look like the costume was on the people, but the stylistic aspect of the painting itself wouldn't suggest the era. And this guy is good at it. He's really good at it. He's got this idea, shall we say, this idea of idealizing. And all idealizing means is to take on a form like that. Like it might be Greek when he does the apotheosis of Homer. And here it's Persian. And this is very similar in its flatness and its formy type of interpretations, even the fingers, of a number of Persian art that I've seen. I think they're all watercolors probably or whatever. Millet, that for this picture, for Millet, really is one of my favorites, and I'll talk about it. But one of the things he can do is be like essentially an impressionist, and he's got a little field with bunnies on it, done in pastel. I'm thinking this might be a pastel, but when I first saw this, I saw it in person. I probably was in the MFA collection. They own so many Millets. If they ever have a show up here, it'll be worth your coming to. And they have had, but I mean, not too far back. What was amazing to me was to watch this thing, and then suddenly all of a sudden realize there's a dog out there who's watching through the fence, like there must be somebody coming, or maybe another dog barking in the distance, or something like that. The watch mentality, on point. What's the expression? But with Millet, who is if you've read Virgil, one of his great inspirations, along with the scriptures, the Bible. You will understand this picture. This is a poem of the water, shall we call it that? Everything from the moon to the trees drinking water, to the cattle coming down for water, to the transportation, to washing clothes. You've got the water. You've got the entire poem. The river, I think it's called the river. But this is also very beautiful in its color, the beauty of the evening, the sort of serenity of those kinds of warm colors. What a lovely, lovely harmony has been created. The patterning's entertaining in the same sense as a Greek vase, not like a Greek vase, but in that same way, the pattern's created by the dark sunlight and so on. What a delight this is. Yeah, that's me. And there's Corot, and I could have showed you a number of Corots, but here's a guy that introduces, or regularly is competent and powerful in the expression of the great line of a composition. The great action of the composition. He's just there. He gets it. And this one here is one of my models, so I use it in composition all the time. Again, these pictures are so quiet. His, Vermeer's, and others, there's a quietness about them, isn't there? There's a quietness. Some pictures are noisier. These are noisier. Why even say that, But the quietness of Millet, and then Corot. And of course, we get a little noisier here with Bierstadt and Church, the American West, and and some, I guess that one down below there is supposed to be Maine, so. But the idea of the great frontier and painting with grandeur, everything was about the grandeur of a thing. The Cotopaxi, the volcanic explosion in South America. I mean, he went down there and painted that stuff, I suppose, while it was happening. And that's Church did. This Bierstadt, by the way, is up near me at the Fairbanks Museum, St. Johnsbury. One of those, a handful of pictures eminently worth having a look at if you're ever in the neighborhood. Who doesn't love grandeur, by the way? What was that? I think I mentioned it probably before, but there's a Chinese saying apparently that that the mountain should be a foot high and the tree should be something, the size of a thumb, and man should be the peanut. There's something about that that would ultimately, I can't remember what the middle size one was, but it ultimately suggests the idea of grandeur in a painting. A lot of that feeling of grandeur does come from Michelangelo. His influence is immense in different ways, such as that. So Leighton is something I was reading based on a different picture, but there was this whole conversation that was really curious about whether or not he was being sexual or whatever. And I think you can find that online. You could read it yourself. But his interpretation of form. Then they were trying to go into this thing about whether that was a thing with men. He, was drawing beautiful forms on men as well, and so on and so forth. And he just expressly says what he's doing, and it's exactly what I care about, what anyone in this field is primarily about, and that is form, color, line. Keep it simple, value play, pattern, spot making, and things like that. It's just, that's what we care about. So this is a study of one of the great form problems, meaning the unity out of the complexity of the human body is a lesson for everybody. And then once you've been there and you've studied the figure as a student, of course, what would you want to not do that for? He produces several of these. The Flaming June is one of them that we all have been startled in the face by. But these sort of idols, what they call idols, almost feels like a piece of heaven somewhere. I suppose that's related to the tendency of the British to believe in utopia and all those sorts of things. Or maybe it's just an idea of a good life. It feels like there's a balmy temperature out there. There's fruit on every tree. The birds, everybody's being snakes, even being friendly with you. Yeah. Lions lying down with the lambs. I don't know what I think of that. I'm not a fantasy guy in that sense. Let everybody be happy thing. I'm more of a realist, but I don't want to say that in a way that implies that I want realism in the sense of showing all the warts and never doing this kind of thing. I don't mean that at all. It's always producing a great sense of form. But this one here is one of, to me, the great portraits of all time. Sir Richard Burton was who, by the way, asked Leighton not to make him too ugly. He said that Sir Richard Burton was an explorer, British explorer, very significant body of work, and he undoubtedly, his face suggests that in the way it's managed here with the forms and all this interpretation of scar or whatever, suggests a really pretty hard life, and in that physical sense of the use of his body. And in that way, it's a remarkable interpretation, use of the management of powerful forms in the interpretation of a man's life. Very, very remarkable picture for that. And most times you just get people making the shapes right and the skin right like it really is. And who knows? I mean, he's certainly borrowing, and he's certainly got the shapes. And I'm saying certainly borrowing the content that's under there, but that ability to grasp what it is about the guy and then bring it on through the content of his face, that's a big thing. This is a wonderful portrait, yeah. By the way, I just wanted to get these guys, and I probably should have put them in earlier. I couldn't find any really good ones right up front, right quickly, but the Greek vase, Ang and others talk about it, and I was a big fan of it once I heard Ang talk about it. I started, I-N-G-R-E-S, by the way. That's I-N-G-R-E-S. But the idea of flat patterns, just a big, big deal to grasp that there is content here that is part of picture making. You group the figure to make a more fascinating shape. You pile this one into that one, and you wind up with more interesting openings for the darks and all sorts of entertaining stuff. But look at the play of the dark patterns and stuff in the midst of the lights, in the midst of these darks here, in the midst of this other light, or the lights in the midst of the grand dark, or whatever. But it's all cut out, and all these shapes are so full of meaning, full of content, shoulder content, calf content. But look at the pattern. This is an unfortunately weak shot of this thing, but it's quite a famous, one of the most famous. But I found so many in the Boardman books. I'd recommend you have a look at those and inform yourself. But the idea of figure grouping to create fascinating abstractions, and abstractions even that might evoke more effectively the content of your theme. Yeah, That's a thing. That's a feast for me. It's always been a feast. These aren't the best of those that I've seen. So Jérôme, we grew up around that with Gamel. That was one of the great pictures we've got to go look at the Museum of Fine Arts, and this one called The Gray Eminence. Funny story, and I don't want to tell you that, but this guy was being, he was a scary guy, let's put it that way. And, but beautiful in color distribution. This is a little hyper, the colors are a little bit too strong. But I couldn't find one that the colors were strong enough on this red, for example, that everything was washed out. And it does come across with more beauty than that. But then, this stuff winds up being a little, I think, too rich. But nevertheless, a really beautiful color scheme. This overall sandy, dull gray, neutral as can be, and then the relative lesser of the blues, and then the relative brilliance of the reds. Dominating it is, and the proportions, it's just really, really, really marvelous. And this guy, by the way, I'm going to say, if I maybe just did, he's one of the great designers of all time. He really is a well-schooled designer. He's the guy that introduced us to the idea of the main line, right? The main line and counter lines, however that's all going to work. But the main line, the idea of a main line in a picture is huge, huge, huge. And this guy introduces that. It's surprising to me there aren't better composers immediately following Jérôme. Not that they're horrible or anything, but he must have been one of the most serious students of composition of any time. But yeah, I don't find, I find difficulties in Bouguereau's compositions frequently, but not in Leighton's. Very rare. Oh, now I'm picking on Bouguereau. This one we saw when we were studying at Williamstown in the summer, doing landscapes and stuff. This one which is probably a 12-foot painting. I think the figures are pretty nearly life-size, if not actually. And this dominated a great foyer, a great open space in the museum, and it was just beautiful. It had good natural light hitting it. It couldn't have been presented more beautifully. And of course, it's just a pretty staggering picture. It's wonderful in the way it hangs together, and the beauty of the flesh, is really classically Bouguereau. This is actually some people would call this the decline, where everything begins to be about the noodling up of the model and that sort of thing. And this does present, unfortunately, as in ways that are photographic, in ways I think that take something away. If you're landing somewhere, most people land somewhere between the the Ang thing, where he's just idealizing everything, and this. But yeah, he was referred to in France. They had a nickname for him, Bouguerotte. His work was Bouguerotte, like Bouguerotic. Erotic was part of it, and it was a pun that wasn't pleasing. But so even then, I think it was felt. Although could say it was by his enemies, not his friends. But who knows? I put this one up here too, by the way, because this face is rather like my wife's, who's a 50% Breton. Her father was Breton, and this is the Breton sister and brother, and this face just is remarkable. Remarkable to me at the time. I think I mentioned to you all that Mr. Gamel actually asked Eleanor's last name, my wife's last name, and when she told him, he went immediately looking up, thinking it sounded familiar. And there's more to that story, but he dug up her background and found that her last name, which was Leguiou, there was a maid for Delacroix had the same name, or a reasonably similar name, undoubtedly a relative. There's more. It's sort of an interesting colorist, just a version of colorism. It's almost like everything he does is like putting on yellow glasses, putting on blue glasses, and then he paints everything. He tunes it all to that color. So the skin will become, if you make this a redder one, the skins will become redder, and so on, if you make it a blue. And he's done that with girls playing badminton or standing there holding badminton, shuttlecock, whatever stuff. And you'll see a blue one, a pink one, a yellow one, a green one, whatever, a whole series of them. Would have been great on a screen. I don't know if they're ever used on a screen or anything. And of course, Waterhouse was just attractive to all of us. This kind of painting, first of all, more painterly than the academic by a bit. And then, of course, it's just appealing because of the theme, which is a big deal, but very beautifully handled thing. And Waterhouse left a mark on everybody around. Degas is where you really get introduced to thinking about composition thoroughly abstractly. And it's very evident that his work is organized around, for example, getting these stick-type areas to correlate, to go make sense together, traveling from the darker, lower contrasty ones to the middle ones to stronger ones. And there are various other ways to think about this, but the spotting of the darks, and this idea of actually confusing, this is that idea of creating, in a Greek way, conflating shapes rather than isolating them. And it was so frequent that you would just, and this is sort of a lost and found model, but this picture just has that intrigue for me. The first look is just interesting, and the next look, it's remarkable how it's how poetically, how everything is rhymed up and tuned up. The yellow's all playing to a plan. Very, very, very clear. He's the one who talks about Puvis saying that his pictures no part of them could be moved without ruining the thing. That shows you how he grasped the idea of interrelatedness. But he's really brilliant at it. This whole foreground here, which is figures standing there, turn into the musicians. These might have been all musicians here. Turn into musicians' instruments, musical instruments, and they become hair, which just wanders out of the picture and makes it just a fascinating, amusing line. Just to get started in the discussion. I mean, all sorts of things are happening here that are like these. I mean, these, again, back to this idea of rhyme schemes, plans of, alliteration or whatever else it is, but things that go to things that go to things, That's in the very nature of the idea of unity. And that's pictorial unity, not subject unity. Much like these are here, the big blossomy dresses, and here's the base of this will be a tree trunk, and the roots, which is probably just a prop, doing all this stuff. And he gets all these arms going up, playing that game with them. So that these are all variations in and through the other thing. And we've talked about this before, but this is the pure magic that makes Degas. And this is where Degas goes beyond Monet, and he starts just becoming a distribution machine. He takes the same broken color ideas. He doesn't go outside and make it up. He does it from drawings in the studio, but he designs this field as an imaginative painter would. And then he's very, very, very aware. I think more so actually than Veronese, of the run, the interplay, but in the pursuit of one after the other. Even just talking about the way these reds may relate to the oranges down here, or the travel, even the orange of this thing here, and how it relates to all the other green, and how it relates to all the other greens and so on. And you can see probably some of the same kinds of stuff as you see this and all this other, and this click-clack stuff over here. You see all the interrelationships that give this the very definition of, I just like the bottom one. So there's Monet, and what's not to love? I don't know if that bottom was actually quite strong enough, but this idea that we actually can find the music in color now, and we're free to do so for the first time on its own terms, it befuddled a lot of people, and I think some people took the idea that we could just make messes of the drawing because of the way he handled stuff. But there is an element of drawing in this. It just isn't outline based, and when you get to the Boston School, it's much more so. So how am I doing with time? Oh my God, it's just flying by. So here's Thayer, one of my favorite monumental pictures, and the treatment of these things is much more monumental. He's not drawing in a little way. Pictures like this are made to be seen from far away, and you don't need lots of little detail for them to be totally what they are. Very beautiful. This is obviously Greek-based, very much monumental. Feels like a classic piece of bas-relief. This is Blanchfield. Blanchfield is the great American muralist, and this isn't his greatest thing, but it's pretty. It gives some pretty significant idea. You can almost hear the bells of Edgar Allan Poe, the bells, all the sway and motion of the bells, and the birds even participating in it, all over the place. You see it on Christmas cards from time to time. And then there's the Matthews couple, Arthur and Lucia Matthews. But Arthur Matthews, this to me is pure decorative poetry. This is really the dance of color, of form, of line. The travel, this beauty of this line and the counterplay. And he's done it twice. He's done it in two different variations coloristically. That's really just marvelous stuff. Yeah, those are great things to love. I love these because of the moods that's in this. Just sweet moods, just amazing. The moodiness. I think he was thinking of it as a spiritualness or something like that. But the isolation of a single figure in a very big field, this grandeur is still there. But there's an element. These aren't classic. This one at least isn't in the direction of a classic composition, but it's it leaves you hanging with some questions. But seeing that at the Museum of Fine Arts again was that's a nice collection. If you get a chance to see it, please do. But in us is the beginning of that, the tonalist thinking, and this sort of he was all drawing all the time for some significant part of his life, and then he began to find the soft, the lost, that sort of thing. And tonalism is, somewhat related to that. In the case of Whistler, it's because you're standing in the fog, literally, or in the evening light, which always knocks the edges out quite a bit and turns it into a softer phenomenon. So there's Whistler. I was putting this one in thinking, I don't know which one of these is true. I have a feeling it's this one. You keep seeing one like this, but it looks, this says it's golden, harmonies in golden blue. And by the way, this is the introduction to the idea of this being music. That's say somebody's using the words here with Whistler. And he's describing his pictures in those terms that were uppermost to him. This is a variation or symphony in blue and gold. That's part of my love for it. This patterning stuff here that he's doing. Puvis is a mural painter, basically. That's virtually all he does. And everything he does is made to stay flat on the wall in a mural sense. And so this is one that's very evocative. The pigs over here, the prodigal son over here. Get thinking that he better be talking to God about what's going on here. He's made a mess of his life, etc. But the idea of pattern, the idea of everything he did suggests murals, suggests staying flat on the wall, not creating deep holes. These are wonderful examples. I don't like all of his work, I have to admit, and I don't particularly like the one in Boston at all, at the public library, but you should go look at it. There are certainly interesting aspects to it. And then there's Sargent, and who doesn't enjoy Sargent? I happen to be overwhelmed by the beauty of this one here, and there are several that do this, some interiors in particular. The one with the older people in the foreground down below, a picture that's wider than high. But this one is an imaginative picture. I mean, that's pretty cool stuff. Painted with the lost and found model, the visual order sort of mindset that he maintained. And then there's Winslow Homer, What's Not to Love. This was at the Clark Museum again. I can't get enough of Winslow Homer. There's something that he's doing. There's a definite organizational charm to these things. It's pretty special. And of course, a poignancy too. There's a boat out there in the waves. Is that going to be okay, etc. And of course, Sorolla. Saw that at the Hispanic Society when I first saw Sorolla, and was blown away by it. It doesn't come across as being this light. I think the darks are a little bit washed out in this one, a little weakened, but really, really a remarkable tour de force. And again, probably, essentially an imaginative picture. This whole thing didn't just sit there. So he painted fast. So and that's his whole point. He says, I couldn't paint fast. I couldn't paint at all. But this is just a special picture. The whites in here, there's so much color in what you're thinking of as whites. So much color. And it's bleeding color. It's pouring profusely. The paint is on the thick side, much like a certain Tintoretto that I'm not going to talk about tonight. It's at the Met. And there's DeCamp, just the movement of light. I wish this could be even photographed to show the magic of movement of light. The travel of the light on the wall, the travel, but the beauty of the skin tones. But painting, this is Monet indoors, but with a management, what you might say a mixed management of the square edge, the articulated edge, not just fuzz. This one was where I think I first picked up on the idea of the big smash of light on a face. So how important it is if you blow your eye to make sure that thing maintains its unity as in its own light and not overmodel it so it becomes dirty and loses that big glow. It's a lesson. This one's in Indianapolis, by the way, Indianapolis. This one's at RISD, Benson. Remember first seeing that, lots of paint. And this is after the period, obviously, where they decided they weren't going to paint thin anymore, him and Tarbell. This is one worth seeing. It's really worth your time to go see that one. And any number of other Bensons, for sure. Tarbell doing the Judge Hammond. I think it's one of the great portraits of America. One of the great portraits of all American art. Yeah, beautiful stuff. Managing the drawing, the essential drawing, and willing to lose the other parts. It's hard to see it in this one, but that's not a bad reproduction. Alexander, John White Alexander, I've copied this for someone and a client, but this is so I had lots of time before this one, but this is, to me, a wonderful example of the great Art Nouveau line. And rather so is this one, right? The great line that you can understand much better the concept of the main line of a picture when you look at these. You would say the great gesture, the great movement of a picture. These are so worthy of your time. Of course, Mary Cassatt, what's not to love? They're very cut out. They're very papery in a certain way, but there's a wonderful sense of form, wonderful sense of color, and more than anything, a wonderful sense of the poignancy of childhood, and love comes through it, of the maternal relationship and the child itself. Doing as part of the aesthetic movement, and this picture here to me is almost a summation of, how can you take a painting and turn it into an object of art? But it's almost a summation of great art. It's what's in the back of your mind when you think great art. It's got beautiful, rich colors and great form, and just everything you can possibly put together. But everything is intriguing, even as objects. This is beautiful in its aesthetic. The object itself is, the dress is. It's just a thing. It's those guys who are there. There was a thing. You might look into it, the aesthetic movement. But this one we saw at the Gardner, and this is a wonderful example of the lost and found management of a hand in a dress. He's one of the 10. He's one of the Boston guys. One of those guys that became part of that group that showed together, traveled shows together even. He's, I think, from down in, is it New Jersey, Philadelphia area, somewhere down lower. Yeah, I want to say Montclair, but I don't even know where that is. So I'm almost ending here now, and I'm a little faster than my other two versions of it, but these are me just wanting to not take for granted the Japanese had so much influence ultimately on Western art at some point. But Udamaro, that's his date there, so that'd be somewhere around Reynolds or Joshua Reynolds' date. And these things are prints, right? So, the flatness, which may be part of what Mary Cassatt is doing, may come in part from what these people are doing. And that was very much a discussion about keeping your picture flat, keeping it two-dimensional, letting the magic be a two-dimensional thing. But this could be the example. There's no real form in this dress. It's all done with line. You see what I mean? Modeling, you wouldn't say there's a thing at all with modeling. And so it goes very flat. And then I'll show you these. I love Chinese painting, and I'm pretty sure these are both Seshu. But here again, they're seeing already, and look at the date here, 1420, they're already seeing and articulating the lost and found look. Leonardo talks about aerial perspective in that sense of it neutralizing the color, maybe disassembling the hardness of the form or whatever, forgetting how he says it, but this is just a stunning visual example of things disappearing into the fog, lost and found. And the minimalist mentality that you see in this one, I saw the name on this and I forgot to write it down, and then I couldn't find it again. But this, what is this, if not an introduction to Degas to have things exit his picture? The famous one where the two women that are leaving the stage, and both of them are crammed over into this side like to exit. But how is that not just totally pleasing? You'll see the importance of actually shooting into that space. It's not insignificant that they do that, isolate something in there. It's not even insignificant that he placed this there, but still, this is fascinating aesthetics. And I like this guy. I'd never picked up this name before. This is Zhu, I guess, Zhu Wei. And this is what you characterize, this kind of thing where you paint light forms and they appear to be further back. Light, low contrast, lighter value. And then you plant darker ones and they become the foreground stuff. This is just very, very beautifully painted. And again, I think this is all Chinese again. These are these blobs, this almost ink spotting blobs, which isn't it? All of them look like they're articulated. Every single piece of it does. To me, this is just pure magic. And now this is, of course, if you just blur your eyes, this is just what spotting is to a Boston School painter. And with that, I'm going to end. And this is going to be the end of this video. And then I'm going to go on immediately and do a video about drawing, some of my favorite drawings. And it really isn't all encompassing, but I had to do two today. So I'm doing two things that are sort of together so I can get all the work done. But I want to thank you all for your kind donations, your liking, sharing, and subscribing. It's so much appreciated. And and keep your questions and comments coming in, something that might be useful if you think of anything. Even something that's just unbelievable that you think we're doing or something like that. Just anything, just throw stuff out. Let's just see if we can get a conversation or a point of departure that might be amusing to others, or valuable to others. But in the meantime, yeah, just keep it coming, and we'll see you in the very next video where I'll be dressed the same, sitting the same, and not even moving. Okay. Maybe I'll take off my jacket. It's a little hot in here. All right. Wish you well. See you. It'll be a week before you see the second video. All right.